You're right there. You're right there. Oh, got a interesting screen on our screen there.
You like the theme
Yeah,
music?
just carry on. Okay, Scotty's got to do something. Sorry about that. We can't see ourselves, but you can see us, so that's all right. We don't need to see ourselves. We know what we look like. Neil spends a lot of time looking in the mirror anyway, don't you, Neil? Too much time.
No, he doesn't.
No, actually the opposite. You should spend a lot more time looking in the mirror.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, carry
You're
on.
so vain.
Yep. Probably think this show is about you.
Enter the Dragon.
Yeah. Is that what it's called? Enter the Dragon.
Wow.
That was a good movie. Bruce Lee, is he coming?
Tentatively. Bruce Lee, yeah, the spirit of Lee, you know. Be like water.
Be like water.
Yeah.
Be like the Chinese.
Yes.
What are the Chinese doing? That's what I want to know. What are those Chinese up to?
I got to the
Always
chase. I think
suspicious of
I think they came out this week. And no, they're not LGBT. They
Didn't
came
come
out pretty clearly on Russia's side.
They did?
I mean, it was obvious to anyone paying attention.
It's
But
always going to happen.
Western, capitals have been sort of lying to themselves the last 10 years. Well, China's still in play. Well, we could convince them with, arguments and bribes and all sorts of ploys. They could yet be on our side against Russia. Yeah, right. So I think pretty much this week the Chinese stated whose side they're on. That Rubicon has been crossed. It's China and Russia against America.
Yeah, it's always going to happen, right? I mean,
over long term, not necessarily, but yeah, in our time, yes. I mean, longer term, like we talked about earlier, the US has had this in mind in the past and been wary of it. And Kissinger warned about it recently because he had experience getting China on side back in 1979, splitting up the alliance, the Eastern Communist Alliance.
Well, China's a different animal, though, from the West perspective. You can't just turn around and say, Xi killed my baby.
No.
Because, I mean, what are you going to do for your plastic crap? And by plastic crap, I mean everything else as well as plastic crap. China's the production factory of the West, basically. You don't mess with them, just on a whim type thing,
Yeah, that was a bit racist, Joe. Plastic crap. Come on.
Well, it used to be called plastic crap. That's
they started made in China. It used to mean,
They started out with plastic crap. That's how
everyone starts somewhere.
That's how they got a shoe in the door,
Yeah, and then they climbed to the top.
Yeah, and now they're a lot more than.
And now they've got more ICBMs than the United States of America.
Well, not just military, but I mean in terms of what they produce for the West, how the West economy.
Yeah, everything in this room is Chinese.
Yeah, including you. You were made in China,
including that fancy shirt you're wearing.
Probably,
there.
If I look somewhere on it,
it's made to look Western. Like
this computer.
I'm Joe. I'm wearing a Western shirt.
That fish, for sure,
definitely
is made in China.
Them cameras, that screen,
that fish,
these mics,
that fish, in China. Those screens. Some of them were packaged in the West, like packaged in Europe or in America. You get them from China, put them in a box, and then say packaged, assembled in Europe, assembled in America, but made in China. Yeah, it's an awful lot of stuff. So that's what I'm saying. They can't really do.
It's not just stuff, though. I get your point.
No.
The kind of codependency because of the way it's been stitched together with the outsourcing of industry and so on to China. But it's more than that, though. There's also the cultural thing. It just wouldn't fly. China shot down the plane and killed my baby because they've been so non-militaristic, so principled about. This is one thing we'll talk about. Like they have a principle against sending weapons
or
either party in a war.
Conflicts,
yeah, they don't. They just don't. And the track record shows that.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. The last time they fired a bullet over their border, I think it was against Vietnamese troops. And that was just a one-day border spat. Even when they fight the Indians over disputed borders in the Himalayas, sticks, put the guns down. They just beat each other over the head.
Yeah.
They're very, very strict view about that. So you'll never get the it just won't fly to play their terror thing with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they can only criticize them on, well, look at how they treat their own people.
Yeah.
Xinjiang.
Yeah.
Tibet,
The Uyghurs, yeah.
Hong Kong.
Yeah.
You know, and even then, when you look in them, when you really look at it, it's weak sauce.
Mm.
So, yeah, well, I suppose we'll start.
Those, yeah,
One.
those stick fights are still still go on, you know.
Yeah.
Check it out there, Scotty. It's like it's years, like I don't know, 10 years ago or more that I first saw the first. Go ahead, first. The sticks.
Even the music is scarier than the actual fight.
Beat each other with sticks. It's actually it's a bit of a joke. Like this was 2 months ago. Brutal, unreported clash in India. It's going on all the time, and they claim victory after they, you know, push them back. The Chinese will try and get over that wall, and the Indians will beat them back, and then they'll claim a major victory. And it doesn't get on Twitter. Well, it gets on Twitter, but it doesn't get into the mainstream media. So they're very unhappy about the fact that their major victory in their ongoing brutal clashes with sticks. Parliament.
Parliament in India.
I'll talk about it, yeah. And I'd like to commend the Prime Minister for the glorious victory in the Great Stick War of February 2023. One of many. Anyway, yeah, that's you can drop it there.
But this guy, we'll be talking about him later.
Yeah, actually, Foreign Ministry. Yeah. So that's just a little side, but yeah, it's an example of how, as you're saying, China has long had. It's weird. It's obviously part of their culture. It's deep within their genes, basically. You know what I mean? The warmongery nature of China, at least in the, what would you call it, in the modern era, or even, yeah, probably modern era, the last few hundred years. They've taken a lot and just remained stoic. And it's obviously, like I said, it's obviously part of their makeup, you know. So
and that terrifies Westerners.
Yes, what do you do with someone like that when you have this powerhouse basically that built up its military and its economy and to rival you as the hegemon, the global hegemon, but they're not in any way militaristic, or they don't saber rattle, and they always try and, you know, we be friends with everybody. It's like, yeah, but you know, you're building up that big military and you're arguably the world's number one economy now. We don't like that, you know. Could you not act a bit more belligerent so we can demonize you in our media and in our speeches?
Which is why
we'll be friends.
That's why they have to resort to freaking weather balloons.
Right. They had to resort to weather balloon, yeah.
That's about as much of a threat as you can show coming from China.
Yeah. And like we said, in case people missed it last week, the story of those weather balloons, short, although it was like there's all sorts of speculation, there was UFOs thrown in there and everything. Basically, common or garden spy balloon used by many countries. China flew one, as it has done, as America has, as several other nations have, flew it over, you know, different parts of different countries. Nobody cares. Like, I mean, at the time, if you remember in the reporting on that, they said initial reports out of the Pentagon was, yeah, this looks like just one of those spy balloons. Doesn't seem to be anything serious. The strange thing is they actually had to report on it publicly at all, but that somehow got into the media. Someone put it out there in the media. Someone made an issue of this. Like I said, this has happened on multiple occasions in the past over US territory, by China, by other countries, and in the opposite direction. America flies similar weather balloons over China, over multiple other countries. Other countries do the same over other countries. Everybody's spying on everybody else in various different ways. Weather balloons with this array underneath is just one way that they go about doing it, but they have much better spying technology, as was said at the time of the original and best Chinese spy balloon there a few weeks ago. They have satellites, etc., that do a much better job of spying on things. These aren't really, it's just an adjunct, if you know what I mean. It's kind of diversifying your spying operations. Let's do some balloons as well as our spy satellites and all our other, you know, spy planes and stuff. So it wasn't a big deal, but they made a big deal out of it. And the only rational conclusion is they made a big deal out of it. America did, in order to saber rattle over China, to whip up anti-American, anti-Chinese sentiment in America. In in another scenario where this wasn't an issue for them, where they didn't want to whip up anti-Chinese rhetoric, this wouldn't have been talked about at all. You wouldn't have heard it.
And it would have blown over.
It would have blown over completely. Yeah, good one, Neil. And but yeah, so that's what they did. They made a big deal about it to saber rattle over China, to sour American-Chinese relations, to provoke China. And then in order to make, because you remember at the time also it made there was it was a necessary evil in a certain sense by allowing it to fly over and making it a public issue, publicizing the idea that this Chinese balloon was flying over. I think it blew off course. That's what the Chinese said, and I think that's a reasonable estimation of. I mean, that's the best, most likely truth of the situation, that it blew off course. The Americans could have chosen just to say no big deal, let it go, no serious media reporting on it, but they went in the opposite direction, and the necessary evil in doing that in order to demonize China was to make America look weak, because they just let this balloon fly over America. So as a result of that, they had to shoot down 4 university weather balloons, more or less, private, small,
probably American too.
Well, yeah,
from Fairbanks.
Well, yeah, for sure. Well, over in various different places across the US, there were 4 of them right over to the Great Lakes, and they shot down a few of those to make themselves look powerful again. But anyway, the upshot of it was, the reason I'm saying all this is, the upshot of it is that, strangely, despite the fact that it was obviously a kind of like a manipulated scandal to provoke anti-Chinese sentiment, the Chinese decided to respond, and they seem to have responded in kind, in a certain sense. Because, the Chinese should have taken it seriously, because from my perspective, what this said to the Chinese was that the Americans, either the White House itself, or maybe more likely some element of the deep state that over which the White House has no control, have declared their belligerent intent towards China. They basically said, with that weather balloon incident, this is what the Chinese read from that, was that, listen, America, these people in America, it's probably not even the White House. As we know, there are people beyond the White House who can direct America's foreign policy, and they're the ones you have to be really worried about in a certain sense, that they've declared their belligerent intent towards China. So China has responded in kind this week by offering a peace plan for Ukraine, which is how the Chinese operate. But of course, offering a peace plan for Ukraine is tantamount to a declaration of war, as far as America is concerned. How dare you? And here's an example. Do you want to talk about that in more detail before I show the picture, or will I show the picture of? There's one image from the document that the Chinese released about. I
have the Chinese foreign ministry link to it, but maybe you have a screenshot of the same thing.
Yeah, I have the actual map.
It's 12-point plan. Just stick it up there briefly.
Yeah, you go ahead.
We won't even read it out. It's short on specifics as to what would be bartered, but the Chinese don't see it like that. In point number 3 or 4 is like, okay, just ceasefire immediately, just stop, or try to just de-escalate at least. It's 12 points. You see it there, number 3.
The second one's interesting. Abandon the Cold War mentality. I mean, that's what the hell? What do you mean abandon the Cold War mentality? Well, that's what America's lived on and grown fat on for the past 50 years, 60, 70 years.
Well, I went straight to number 3 because that concerns the situation at hand. So the overall thing is short on specifics. But it's eminently sensible. So ceasing hostilities.
Well, you see, but on the second point there, abandoning Cold War mentality, that's a red flag. That's a red flag for America. Because look what it says, the first line: the security of a country should not be pursued at the expense of others.
That's exactly what Russia was saying in December 2021.
Are you sure this is in the Russian document?
But the thing, the two of them, like they often they use the same phrases. They have done since the late 90s with multipolar world. They have the same positions on.
But America's security is always pursued at the expense of others,
right?
But that's like I said, it's a declaration of war. War against. That's how you declare war against America. That's how fragile they are. That's how woke and fragile the American government is and deep state is. If you say to the American government, or the American deep state or whatever, the security of a country should not be pursued at the expense of others, that's a declaration of war. How dare you? suggest such a thing. What are you saying? You saying I shouldn't go around the world enriching myself and benefiting myself at the expense of others? You dirty Chinese.
I know what you're up to. You just want to supplant me. You want to be the hegemon.
Exactly. You just want what I am, but you can't have it. It's mine. Mine.
You should read it. It's a short document because it's so sensible. It's,
Nah, resuming peace talks. Where's the sense in that? Show me what else what other ridiculous notions have they got there? Ceasing hostilities? Get it fucking real, will you? Resolving. What do you mean resolving humanitarian crisis? Come on, talk sense. Protecting. Protecting civilians. Yeah, sure. Keeping not keeping nuclear power plants safe. Nobody in the right mind would subscribe to that. Strategic risks. We want a lot. Neil, as an American, how am I meant to survive without strategic risks? The only reason I get to, go around the world and have 700 military bases is because there are strategic risks. If you reduce those, what do you want me to go back home? You want to destroy my empire because you want it? Is that it? You want
it? That's exactly right.
Stopping sanctions? No, come on, get over it. Stable industrial supply chains? What are you, some kind of conspiracy theorist? Promoting post-conflict reconstruction? No, we don't. That last one, absolutely fucking not. No way. Well, you want us to go back to Iraq, I suppose, do you? Go back into Iraq and Afghanistan and reconstruct? Is that what you want us to do?
Well, the least you could do is give Afghanistan back their own money.
No, I'm sorry. This is just it's a parade of horribles for a start. It's an irrational, ridiculous, fundamentally anti-American diatribe.
It's reality-based community nonsense. Yeah, that's the thing. It's so sensible and reality-based that what's interesting is that none of it was directly addressed by Western governments. They knew this was coming because the Chinese had announced to their foreign minister in Munich that on the anniversary of the launch of the war, February 24th, they would publish this peace proposal. And in anticipation of it, in the days leading up to it.
Well, they're specifically talking about Ukraine here, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They have in mind Ukraine. But they put it in general terms,
right, in broad terms.
In a broad terms, so that no one could possibly disagree with any of the stances. In fact, everyone does claim to agree to them in respect to the sovereign territory of people.
Right. But not in
solve humanitarian crisis.
Not in a way that benefits anybody other than America, though.
Well, right. This would be to the benefit of all.
No. Well, that's fundamentally anti-American. When you talk about benefit of all, that's fundamentally anti-American.
It's communist. No, that's the problem.
And
this is why the two worlds can never meet.
But
in the build-up to this, before they could even announce it, it's bizarre. The US first, then London, then Baerbock in Germany, and then Stoltenberg.
Yeah.
All of them issued statements in about a 36-hour period warning China not to, quote, supply arms to Russia.
Is that what this treaty was about then? It was just a covert way of saying that we're going to give weapons?
They seem to be, in their minds, the Western leaders were forestalling the peace proposal, what we just saw, by saying, we know your game. You're about to come on Russia's side in a big way. And we're warning you not to do that.
Yeah.
Supply weapons.
They also drew a map, the Chinese, specifically in terms of their proposed peace plan. They wanted to be mediators for. They suggested they could be mediators for a peace process or a cessation of hostilities in Ukraine, and they put up a map as what the future would look like. The future shape of Ukraine.
I saw this. Is that really from that Chinese FM?
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of funny. Like I can understand. Like I don't subscribe to their mentality.
Are you sure? I saw that. Are you sure this is an actual Chinese? Map?
Yeah.
Chinese government map. So
I think they're trolling.
They've accepted that the 4 provinces to the south and the east are Russian.
Not just those, but then demilitarized zone.
Then there's a demilitarized zone, and then there's West Kiev and East Kiev.
Yeah, it worked in Germany, right?
Yeah, the Chinese think, well, that was recent. Maybe the Westerners will understand this.
Well, they agreed to it. The Americans agreed to it
Mhm.
after the Second World War, right? East and West Germany. So why not East and West Kiev? All worked out.
It is on a river.
Yeah, of course. So you can see obviously how the Americans weren't exactly enthusiastic about that, and the Europeans weren't enthusiastic. But the reality is that might actually be the end result. You could have another couple of years of war, and that's what it'll end up as.
It's realistic. Although I suspect the demilitarized zone will be more pro-Russian.
But I think it's very generous, like right down to Zaporizhia and Dnipro, like the cities on the river, and the like all, you've got Odessa and Kherson are all still part of Ukraine. No?
Yeah, for now.
No, but I mean, if that was to be implemented, I don't think it's that unreasonable, But, whatever, if you want to keep fighting and then get that, if you want to lose, if the Ukrainians want to lose another few 100,000 soldiers and have, dozens more towns destroyed and then get that, then they're welcome to go ahead and do it,
Yeah. This is realistic as things stand now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's ultimately at this point what it's probably straight out of the Russian kind of the Russian Ministry of Defense, you know what I mean? They probably just Chinese got it from there, But they're looking at the situation, they see it in the same way. But where that map actually ends up, I think Shoigu recently said that the future shape, how far Russia goes into Ukraine will ultimately depend on what kind of weapons the West supplies to.
That was Putin himself in his State of the Union. It was the only thing people were anticipating that last week. Oh my God, Putin's speech.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much they get the one of the world to hate Putin, but they themselves were anticipating the speech.
Yeah.
Kind of the only reference he made to strategic thoughts about what's next for Ukraine. People thought there would be a lot more, but he just kind of gave it on Ukraine. He just gave a pep talk to motivate,
mm-hmm.
the army out there and the locals, of course. But he said that this will end up wherever we will push them back, wherever the current access their weapons have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as far as the weapons can reach. Yeah, so it's all about security. It's all about ensuring the security of Russia and the east of Ukraine, which is ethnic Russians and Russian speaking, and of course the 4 regions that they incorporated into Russia recently. It's all about securing their long-term security, and that's not going to change now. So
it was a smart statement, wasn't it? Because it says it's kind of something you're fond of, pushing the responsibility back on others. So it's saying this isn't just about me and what I decide. There's 2 to tango here.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on you as well.
Yeah.
We will act based on what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But publicly, the West has, these totally hard and fast lines, like Kiev's line. No, this doesn't end until we get every inch back, including Crimea.
Yeah.
But you're saying that, but that's not you're saying that to keep it simple and to keep your side motivated.
The fact that they just on the point of, I keep seeing people like Elon Musk and other people of supposed note, talking about World War III and the threat of nuclear Armageddon still being present, and it getting worse and worse and worse, and getting to the point. And these people don't understand that when you see what Russia's doing, and you see how the West has responded to Russia. Sure, they're both, between Russia and the US, they have the most biggest nuclear arms stockpiles in the world. But it's pretty clear at this point, if these people obviously haven't noticed, but it's pretty clear that there's no intention. It's off the table. All the things that are on the table, nuclear war and nuclear weapons is not one of them. Putin talks about it now and again, like makes kind of subtle references to it or whatever, but I think they all understand that that's not going to happen, because when you hear Zelensky and Western politicians, American politicians, talking about taking back Crimea and striking Crimea, they clearly aren't afraid that would be a red line that would... Because, if you listen to Putin has said that any direct threat against Russia's survival, basically, or threat to the state, they would be justified in using any means available to them to protect the Russian state. He says that, and of course that's held to by other nuclear powered as well. That's the whole point of having nuclear weapons, right? But at the same time, it's a very remote and distant scenario, you know, because if the West really believed that Russia would respond in that way, they wouldn't be talking about bombing Crimea, you know, which is even more than the Donbass, even more than those 4 regions, is very much a part of Russia. You know, of those, between the Donbass and the other 2 regions that they recently incorporated, and Crimea stands out as being inviolably part of Russia for now and forevermore type thing. It's not going away. So when they talk about targeting Crimea, they may as well talk about targeting Moscow. In fact, they have talked about targeting Moscow. So they're happy to talk in those terms in the
kind of absolute terms.
Yeah, in the safety or the security that this wouldn't,
that they're not,
even if they were to do that, it wouldn't cause a nuclear conflict, you know, because there's a kind of strategic kind of stalemate in a certain sense, or in terms of conventional weapons, you know. If they were to launch HIMARS, longer range missiles, whatever, at Crimea, Russia would be able to shoot most of them down. Some of them might get through, and it would raise tensions or whatever, but then it would calm down. So they could go ahead and do that. You know, they could actually attack Crimea, and maybe they will. And there'll be a big hoo-ha about it, and the World War III, nuclear Armageddon, people will poo their pants and stuff, but there will be no nuclear Armageddon. You know what I'm saying? There is a line that they all hold to ultimately, and they're assessing where it is all the time, and it's back and forth. But nobody here is in this conflict is planning to, or has any plans to actually unleash any kind of nuclear weapons at each other, because MAD holds fast. You know what I mean? MAD has been since the beginning, and is still today absolutely relevant, and always will be. You know. So anyway, yeah. You were saying that the media, the Western media in particular, can't help themselves but get very excited about anytime Putin makes a speech.
Yeah. But can we just to wrap up maybe with China first, because we mentioned it at the start, that I'm calling it now. You probably agree that China is
going to supply weapons. It already is.
No. I think that's, well, maybe, is it? Technology,
dual use
technology, maybe. Washing machines. Von der Leyen's scared of washing machines in Russia. Yeah. No, I think they kind of, what's the expression you use? Nailed their colors to the mast.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a busy week for the Chinese Foreign Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
The 12-point plan was weird. It was forestalled by that nonsense. Better not send weapons. Okay. What's that got to do with the peace plan? But anyway, and then subsequently, they just all dismissed it in unison as not credible. It's not credible.
The 12-point plan, yeah.
Yeah, it's just not credible. Why is it not credible? Well,
because war.
Because Stoltenberg said, why not? It's not credible because China has yet to condemn Russia. You have to condemn Russia first, then you can
only then
tacitly join our side, then you can propose a peace plan.
Then you can mediate
on
our side.
I think what's going on here, China's basically nailing its colors to the mast on this issue. It's putting forth its credentials to become the new world's policeman.
Mm-hmm.
Not hegemon, but policeman in the actual sense that people thought America meant it when they said that's our role in the world. Not a crooked cop, an actual policeman. Anyway, so it was a busy week at the Chinese FM. So besides the 12-point peace plan, they published 5 papers. They're at the top of their website, Chinese Foreign Ministry. Just one of them is super interesting. And that guy we saw briefly, the spokesman at the Chinese FM, he read out from one of them. The title of this paper is U.S. Hegemony and Its Perils. And he pretty much read the whole paper out to the press. I have a 2-minute clip of it here. The whole thing goes on in this vein. It's basically like listening to a judge if America and its history and policies, foreign policy, were on trial. And the Chinese this week have basically summarize the case for the prosecution and cast judgment. I've never seen him speak in such a direct way. We've seen it from Putin increasingly ever since 2014. And every year, like last year, he had some amazing speeches because it was like, Jesus Christ, that's no holds barred. He's full on. He's giving it to the US with both barrels. It's the first time I've seen China do it. Not from Xi's mouth directly, but through his government. So they published these 5 papers and they're still churning them out. This is him reading off from one of them.
真正令人担忧的是美国对世界和平稳定起到的破坏性作用。美国是最大的战争制造者。美国建国240多年的历史当中，只有16年没有打过仗。二战结束以来，世界上发生的武装冲突当中，由美国发起的占到约80%。美国也是侵犯别国主权、干涉别国内政最多的国家。据报道，二战结束以来，美国试图推翻50多个外国政府，粗暴干涉至少30个国家的选举，试图暗杀50余位外国领导人。美国还是挑动阵营对立对抗的最大源头。美国领导下的北约对阿富汗、伊拉克、叙利亚的战争，导致超过90万人死亡，3700万人沦为难民。美国的霸权政策和好战倾向延续一天，世界就将一天不得安宁。
As long as America's hegemonic policies continue, there will be no peace in the world. Is basically what he said.
That's
after
one paragraph.
After giving a rundown of what America has done in terms of wars and warmongering over the past.
He gave a super lowball statistic. You might have noticed at the end, 900,000 dead from combined Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. Way too conservative, but whatever. Okay. Plus 37 million refugees. What's interesting about those two numbers, though, is that they were in Putin's State of the Nation address to the Federal Assembly last week. He used the same one.
They're copying off each other.
There's something going on. He paused during his speech to say, and by the way, they are not our stats. We got them from an American official website. Or
that's by their own counting. Yeah.
So they both use the same stats and the same. I thought that was interesting. The kind of, maybe it's just copycat, but you know.
Yeah, well, the Chinese, obviously, I mean, you hear him saying that, and then the Chinese put themselves forward as a mediator of a peace process in Ukraine. You can see how the Americans will be rather skeptical of that, you know. And like you said, Stoltenberg said that they have to condemn Russia first before they would. But obviously, they're not going to condemn Russia. They just condemned America, right? They're the opposite. They condemned America for its warmongering of the 20th century up until today. So it's a moral thing, you know. From the West, there's this moral thing. The bullshit line they've been given from the beginning, which this is a moral war. This is an unprovoked aggression by Russia against Ukraine, which is a lie, obviously. For anybody who doesn't know, it's obviously a lie. It was Russia was provoked into this conflict deliberately, but they still hold that moral argument that we have the moral good on our side, the moral high ground, and therefore China has to get on the side of the moral high ground with us, right? It's like there's a special place in hell reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in a moral crisis, right? Dante Alighieri or JFK, well, both of them said it. Dante, I think, said it first. Anyway, I think he lived before JFK. Anyway, but that China foreign minister has taken a moral position quite clearly.
That's their response. Their response to being moralized to being lectured to by the United States. No, you can't have a credible peace proposal on and nominate yourself as a mediator because you have yet to condemn Russia. Their response is, we're going to condemn you.
Yeah, that's if there's some condemning to do, you're first. But anyway, so Putin gives this speech. People, just to context as well, Putin gives this speech during which was, you know, not different from what he said before, just more of the same. He talked about the moral kind of degradation of the West. He talked about transgenderism in children, and you know, what do you call it? What's the term they use? Gender reassignment therapy, etc. That kind of stuff. He was super moralistic in terms of condemning the West, not just for what they're doing in Ukraine, but in terms of Western society. But he's done that before on a few occasions over the past few years. It's not something new. So this was on the anniversary. People were expecting the 24th was the 1 year anniversary of the start of the conflict in Ukraine, and all the all the armchair generals were expecting there to be some big
major
big
strategic
I'm saying
announcement.
5 million troops or a massive bombardment. They were going to end the war on the 24th, right? It was going to be a big hoo-ha. And there was nothing. Basically, it's just carry on. The war of attrition carries on, but Putin made a speech was the only thing.
And it was domestic. It was basically a budgetary recap of how the last year has been and the health of the economy,
right?
Which is awesome, all things considered. He said they reached their target inflation goal of 4%,
right.
Stuff like that, and gave comparisons. Germany's is pushing 17%, Britain's 20%. You know?
Right?
It's like they're not doing so good. We're doing pretty good though.
Your sanctions haven't worked very well. In fact, they've
Between
had the
the
opposite
lines,
effect.
he said, he said all that.
But so
that isn't that. He only did a little. He only did a tiny section there. I was speaking about values in the state of the West. He didn't,
most of it wasn't internal.
People, his critics. His mainstream critics go, "Oh yeah, we read about those in the history books. The Soviet generals and like Stalin, the Soviet Politburo, they used to have loads of speeches like that, where they'd get up there and rant for 4 hours about how shit the West is, engaging in whataboutery to kind of big up, to give some moral uplift to how shit things were back here on our side of the Iron Curtain. We'll just rant about how bad things are there." And they just summarize in Western reporting about the speech that that's what he was doing. Putin spoke for like 2 minutes. There's a 2-minute section where he makes reference to, and he concludes that thing where he's moralizing about the lack of morals in the West. And he said, well, the last thing on that is I heard that the Anglican Church has proposed to make God gender neutral. Well, you know what this says in scripture.
Yeah.
Lord, forgive them because they don't know what they do.
Right.
And he left it at that. That was the end of it. But people are so starved in the West for anything remotely resembling this kind of statement that they took that 2-minute clip from his 1.5-hour speech and it went viral. That's what all Westerners will remember. But he didn't intend it that way.
Right.
It's a boring 1.5-hour speech about the state of the economy, which is, sound. But there's a little clip and Westerners sought it out. And this is what I told you earlier in the week. It struck me that as I was watching the kind of trending of it on Twitter and elsewhere, that section of it was the most shared. It's the one thing Westerners took from it.
Yeah. But they were, so the Western, like you're saying, Western media was like, as much as they love to hit Putin, right? And they've built him up into such a phony boogeyman that they can't but hang on his every word every time he says something. It's bizarre, and they give him loads of airtime and loads of. Obviously the American political class and the White House and stuff understood that and realized that they had to push back against that kind of media focus on Putin, especially over Ukraine and what he was going to say about Ukraine or whatever. So they had Biden head off during the week there on a secret trip. Secreted into Ukraine on Train Force One, Rail Force One. They got him in
on a train.
Flying. Well, they can't go. They can't fly in, right? It's too dangerous for them to fly in. But So he's there. It's a kind of a joke. He arrives in Kiev. Here's something. I mean, people probably saw this already, but. This is Biden coming out of the Ukrainian White House. I don't know what it is. Anyway, he's coming out with Zelensky, and check it out. On cue.
My God, Mr. President, duck. Duck, sir. The Germans. I mean, the Russians.
The Nazis. Oh, I mean, the Russians. I mean, and then it stops. So it's kind of going in the background a little bit still, but as soon as he walks out, they push the button on the air raid siren. But the funny thing is, if that was genuine, surely there would be a little bit of alarm among the security, maybe. Mr. President, our raid siren just went off. We better get you back inside. No, it's fine. That was all planned. So that's a strong, wobbly, 80-year-old man in a crisis. The reason actually he didn't respond to the air raid siren is because he couldn't hear it, because he didn't have his hearing aids in. Yeah, but it's an example of the crass level of propaganda, and I don't think it flew with most people who saw it. They're like, dude, you just turned on the air raid siren just for effect there. What were you trying to achieve? You know what I mean? We're meant to get from that Biden is so brave.
Yeah.
And the Ukrainians are like, these air raid sirens go off all the time in Kiev. Kiev hasn't been hit by missiles in any significant way for a long time. It's never like the main focus of any missile salvos, and there certainly wasn't going to be any that day. But they turned on the air raid siren anyway. It's that level of crass propaganda that's just like, well, dude, how old are you, and how old do you think we are? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah. So he arrives and just talks a bunch of crap and goes back to Poland, talks a bunch of crap to some people in Poland. Quite a lot of people in Poland. The Polish people are nuts. Like, they've lost the plot completely. I mean, I don't know if the Polish people ever had the plot, but they certainly don't have it now. There's something like 30,000 people or something that they got together to listen to Biden, and they're all screaming and waving Ukrainian flags. And of course, Poles are, you know, I'm not talking about Polish people. Sorry, I can't. It'd take too long. Anyway,
but besides the crass grandstanding choreography that took place in Kiev, I'm just note the fact that they timed it for Biden to be in Eastern Europe when Putin gave his speech. That for me is really telling.
Yeah, well, that's part of the propaganda as well. Obviously, they sent him there to combat the airtime that they were going to give to Putin on part of Putin's speech. But well, we better put Biden in there to show that we're not just sitting back here. He's got something to say as well.
But doesn't that just show you how much things have changed? Putin is just, in the Kremlin.
Yeah,
we didn't have to move.
No.
But Biden had to be put on a plane.
Yeah.
5,000 miles away.
Well, he is like the Queen at the end of the day. The Queen often goes around. The Queen of England often goes around to different countries to represent to big up the England or
the
crown basically, and all she represents, or she did represent, the king now. So he's doing the same thing. Biden is at White House for the most part. The POTUS is a ceremonial position. Doesn't really know a lot of what's going on. It's just told what to do. But there was an interesting little thing here, just in case, and it's deep conspiracy theorist. You thought false flags a few months ago, last year, remember the Pentagon said that false flags were real, except it's only Russia that does them, but false flags are real. Remember that conspiracy theory? It was not busted, but
Boris Johnson launched
verified.
That conspiracy theory, I think.
Yeah, but the Pentagon, remember your man?
Oh yeah, Kirby.
Was it Kirby? Yeah. Anyway, here's another one. Just throw that one up there and play the video. This is Biden again in Poland, but check out that video. Just play there.
To było ściśle tajne. Pod osłoną nocy w specjalnym pociągu Joe Biden przekroczył polsko-ukraińską granicę. Wszystko po to, by dotrzeć do Kijowa. To pierwsza wizyta amerykańskiego prezydenta w Ukrainie od czasu rosyjskiej agresji. Biden spotkał się z Wołodymirem Załęskim. W tym samym czasie nad miastem zawyły syreny. Pojawiły się doniesienia o wysłanych przez Rosję myśliwcach MiG-31. Samoloty miały być uzbrojone w naddźwiękowe pociski. Joe Biden odniósł się do swojej wizyty na Twitterze. Jak pisze, pojawił się w Ukrainie, by potwierdzić niezachwiane zaangażowanie.
Pause. What do you see?
The fella, I saw this. The fella behind.
Who's that?
Dressed in the same way as.
He's not just dressed in the same way.
He looks a bit like him.
That's Zelensky number 2. There's more than one of them.
You think he's a body double?
Yeah.
I thought he was just a bodyguard.
No, well, he's
dressed in
green
camo like him. Because, well, it's a war and all that.
No, the bodyguards are hanging around with camo and guns, and that's his mini-me.
So it's like a decoy. If there's an assassin in the building,
body double
on a rooftop,
he'll go out and he'll go out and walk around
first.
Yeah,
or he's the only one who goes outside
sometimes.
Right. Well, this might be standard, but the Ukrainians are just kind of dumb and new to this, and so they let it show. Maybe.
Yeah. You shouldn't. I mean, if you got a body double, you shouldn't ever. Well, it doesn't really matter if you show them, because you might have multiple body doubles, so it doesn't matter, and it still serves the purpose. Like, governments would assume that Zelensky has a body double, right? Biden might have a body double. Who knows? Boris Johnson, when he was prime minister, there's no way to get a body double for him, unfortunately, because they head on him. You know what I mean? They literally tried. They literally searched the whole world, and they couldn't find anybody with a big, wobbly, fluffy head.
In the end, they just put a wig on a walrus.
Yeah, they tried that. Yeah. So, but yeah, interesting body doubles. So anyway, but actually, I missed something here. There's just on the China thing. There's another. We're talking about we're talking about propaganda, right? So hot in the heels of Chinese spy balloon, then China enters the new Cold War and comes out, making its intentions clear. And then cue the media. Now, of course, the media have done this before, particularly CNN and other organizations like that, but they immediately start with, softballing it, because like we said, they can't go full, Putin killed my baby type thing on China, but it just seamlessly blends into Chinese militarization, China building up its military tensions between China and America, and the media just dutifully runs with that. This is from CNN. I was just looking at it yesterday. It's kind of interesting, again, from a propaganda point of view, but just play the video there.
Warplane filmed just off the wing of a U.S. Navy reconnaissance plane flying over the South China Sea.
We're getting a close-up look at a Chinese fighter jet. The aircrew here identifies it as a J-11, a two-seater that they say is armed with air-to-air missiles. And it's been shadowing this U.S. Navy plane now for about 15 minutes. It is pretty remarkable to see this Chinese warplane operating at such close proximity.
I'd say it's belligerent.
Several hundred feet away from our aircraft.
But I'm cool.
The Chinese fighter escort, part of a regular routine.
I'd say it's another Friday afternoon in the South China Sea.
U.S. Navy invited CNN to fly on a P-8 reconnaissance plane.
U.S. Navy invited
U.S.
CNN.
airbase on the Japanese island of Okinawa.
Level 300, Delta Hotel 776.
Along the way, picking up fuel from a flying gas station.
We're refueling in midair right now, flying just about 40 feet away from a KC-135 tanker plane.
The plane is headed past the self-governing island of Taiwan, which China claims as its own, to the South China Sea, which China also claims almost all for itself, ignoring competing claims from countries like Vietnam and the Philippines.
Not really.
Some 30 miles from the Chinese-occupied Paracel Islands, a Chinese voice crackles over the radio.
American aircraft, this is the PLA Air Force. You are approaching Chinese airspace. Keep a safe distance or you'll be intercepted.
That's when the Chinese People's Liberation Army fighter jet appears, flying so close you can see the pilots in their cockpit.
Oh my God, they're real.
Aircraft. This is U.S. Navy P-8 on VHF 121.5. I hold you off my left wing, and I intend to continue to proceed to the west.
I'd like to remind you that I'm a female.
Responds, but eventually leaves when the U.S. plane turns south.
It's like oil spots as they build on one reef and then build on
Anyway,
another.
you can pause there. It's just, it's this, or stop. It's, I just thought it was an interesting report, and CNN were invited by the Navy to come on this plane. Why?
Because
to do a report.
Well, because
we know that
they knew you were guaranteed to provoke the PLA.
Because we're gonna fly this plane past Taiwan. This spy plane, basically, American spy plane past Taiwan, and would you maybe come aboard and film the Chinese jets that come, and then you can do a report, and just for fun, I don't know, why not?
Yeah, but this is
Americans fly their spy plane close to China, close to disputed Taiwan, and then say that it's shocking that the Chinese have responded. Is it really? Are you shocked? You don't look shocked in that video, dude. I mean, And the guy just said it was like, typical Friday.
Yeah. I think.
Are we meant to be shocked? What should we
you
get
got to
from
put
that?
yourself in their headspace. They're exceptionalists, so their main reaction is mild amusement for now at these upstarts. Like, who do you think? You're not seriously claiming this is your airspace. They are actually.
But this was done for the American public.
Yeah.
No other reason but for the American public. Put it on the front page on CNN. And it's like, so it's the public should be asking themselves, what am I getting from this? What do you want me to get from it? What does the government here want? Because this is a government operation, basically. On CNN, this is a government operation on CNN because it was the Navy, i.e. the Pentagon, that invited CNN to come along to produce this video to put it in front of the American public's eyes. So they can get a certain something from it. I'm not sure what it is. They know what they want the public to get from it, but it's a joke,
It's an impossible stretch. They're trying to bring people around to we're under attack in the South China Sea, in Crimea, in the Persian Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to say. These people are nuts. They just assume most Americans, and therefore most of Westerners at least, agree with them that they see the world from the same viewpoint. Here's another one. Here's a this is an American senator. Have a listen. He's discussing ostensibly he's discussing Ukraine and sending weapons, but it's actually bigger than that. He makes a super revealing comment. This is like the senator for Louisiana, Republican. Kennedy, no relation to the Kennedy family. Play that.
Well, it's not going to be easy, and there is risk, but there's even greater risk, in my judgment, if we do nothing.
Send money to Ukraine.
I have sponsored a bill, I haven't been able to pass it in the Senate, that would have the president appoint a special inspector general to follow every penny and to embed people in Ukraine so we can follow the money. But I have never viewed the money we're providing to Ukraine as an act of charity. I see it as an act of self-preservation. It's clear to me that Xi is working with Putin, who's working with the Ayatollah in Iran. Their goal is to have Russia dominate Eastern and Central Europe, to have Iran dominate the Middle East, and to have China dominate the Indo-Pacific and Sub-Saharan Africa. And that is not a place that is safe for the American people.
Make it make sense. You see, he's trying to square the circle. He cannot do it, but he tried his best.
To what?
To make America safe. The place they live, the geography, the North American continental chunk, the piece of the world. To make that safe, those countries over there cannot dominate
the rest of the world.
Their geographies.
Their sphere of
That's
influence.
why we must send weapons to prevent them. Otherwise, you won't be safe.
America's not safe if other countries in the world have influence over their region.
If they remove us from being able to dominate their regions.
If we dominate the world, and any de-dominization makes the world not safe for America. In what way not safe? He said not safe for Americans. Aren't most Americans in America?
He's trying to appeal to people in Louisiana, his constituents.
But how does it not make them not safe if China were to dominate the Asia Pacific area?
He won't. They just keep repeating the party line. None of them ever articulate it.
Yeah, explain it. Like there's only a little bit left of his dialogue there to actually complete the thought, the idea, to make it make sense, right? Only a little bit left. We know what it is, right?
Trump blurted
it's
it
economic.
Out. It's economic. It's the dollar. It's seigniorage. Trump blurted it out when he said, "What do you mean the debt ceiling? We just print more dollars." That was as far as Trump went with it. The Chinese report that I just quoted earlier, one of the 5, went into detail on it. Again, Putin said it in speeches already. They're not the first to say this, but there's now two governments that have begun to articulate the problem. The core problem is seigniorage. US dollar domination of world capital flows around the order of 90% means that every time anyone else buys and sells, they have to use dollars, right? It means the US just has to pay, the Chinese report said, just 17 cents to print a $100 bill. Everyone else has to pony up $100 worth of goods.
Right.
Y'all living high on the hog of everyone else. What he's saying is, if we don't send some of that funding money, however much it takes, to Ukraine, we're screwed, because we're no longer going to get the free tax benefits.
Well, because American power in the world will wane and decline, and with it, its economic influence, and therefore all those dollars come back home, and America contracts to its rightful size, and there's massive poverty, basically. So it is existential. It's existential.
And he is genuinely concerned about his constituent back in Louisiana, but he won't go on to say the whole thing, because he will...
Because it undermines...
Take a sword and rip to shreds the moral rationale, the self-myth we tell ourselves about why we're great and those Chinese are evil and so on.
Right.
Because if you say that part, the quiet part out loud, you will practically want to pull your eyes. You'll say, I don't want to be a Westerner. Never mind, maybe not even an American. It will seriously cause you...
Well, you'd have trouble...
To have doubt about everything.
Well, you might have doubt about it, but you'd certainly have trouble justifying, America
sending $100 to Ukraine.
Yeah, or sending the American military around the world to continue American hegemony, unless you really understood it and you're taken into a back room and given the details, that last bit of the dialogue, basically, of what it actually means. You might say, well, yeah, this is essential for us. We need to do whatever is necessary to make sure that we stay top of the pile. But you're talking about the petrodollar there. But aren't fossil fuels going to go extinct like the dinosaurs that made them? And in that case, are we going to have
the next Rishi Sunak?
We're going to have the solar panel dollar.
Yeah, they've already prepared all this
turbine dollar.
That guy, the former governor of the Bank of England, he was
solar turbine dollar.
Where is he with now? He was organising the G20 in Glasgow, and they explained in a speech there, the greening of part of the greening of the economy was to restructure finance away from petrodollar,
right,
to prepare the ground for
digital currency
and
a brave new world.
To lock it in, if they were no longer using as much oil and gas, but that's still an if, because they're using as much as they ever have. But
and they know they're going to keep doing that.
But in the castle in the sky they're building for the future, they have a contingency for that too. So petrodollar would not be. They would not necessarily be coupled, fossil fuel energy, so-called, and the US dollar.
Mm-hmm. Putin actually gave a speech, another speech yesterday, I think, on Saturday, with Russia One TV. Did you come across it? No,
interview, yeah,
an interview, yeah, not a speech, an interview. He was just talking to the reporter, and he basically, it was interesting. I think he talked about a bunch of different things. It wasn't that long, but his main points, I just kind of noted them down. His main points were that the unity of the people of Russia is the main condition for all the victories and achievements of the country. So we nod to unity, stay unified, right? Russia should take into account the nuclear potential not only of the United States, but also all other NATO countries, France and Great Britain, when the alliance considers the strategic defeat of Russia as its main goal. Basically, in this interview, his main points were talking about the threats that have been leveled against Russia and what it means for the Russian people. He says the West has one goal, and that's to eliminate the Russian Federation. He says US satellites have joined the fight, and by US satellites he means basically Europe and everybody else who is enthralled to America. US satellites have joined the fight against the Russian Federation, but they are aware of the selfishness of Washington's intentions. So he's seeing a little bit of dissent amongst the vassals to some extent. he said the West could accept Russia into the family of civilized nations, civilized peoples, but only in parts. They would never accept it at all. He says the Russian people, if the West succeeds in destroying the Russian Federation and establishing control over its fragments, would not survive. The Russian people would not survive. He said there would be Muscovites, Urals, and others. He said the world must change, but Russia is against building a new world in the interests of only one country, United States, echoing what the Chinese have said. Russian Federation will not behave like the United States in relation to other countries. Of course, they don't believe that, and a main part of their anti-Russian or pro-Ukraine argumentation has been that Ukraine is just the first step, right?
Yeah.
Next is Poland, then it's Latvia, then it's Berlin, then it's Paris, then it's Washington DC.
Yeah.
Nonsense. Anyway, but he says Russian Federation would not behave like the country that it is like the USA, that it has today been, and for many years been, condemning for its behavior. It would not just turn around and start behaving like the country that it has been fighting against for so long. And he interestingly said, I mean, it's a point we talked about last week. He said NATO deliveries of weapons to Ukraine is participation in the conflict. Why? Because the West does not receive money for these weapons. It would be one thing if they were just selling weapons and getting money for them, but they're pumping weapons into Ukraine and with no charge. And it's funny, he threw in at the end, France was humiliated by the Americans in the situation, in the cancellation of the order for submarines for Australia. Remember that about 5 or 6 years ago, where Australia had ordered a bunch of submarines, and they had ordered them from France for France to manufacture them. And America went in and nixed that deal, and said, no, you'll buy ours instead.
Forming the AUKUS, another paramilitary alliance,
Right. So that speech was like, Putin obviously was talking about the threats and what we need to do and where they're coming from. And he's sounding an alarm in a certain sense, or just letting the Russian people know, because it was on Russian state TV, letting the Russian people know that this is what we're up against. It's not going to happen there. But this is what they're trying to do. This is what the West is trying to do. It's trying to destroy Russia. It has been for quite a while. And, we ultimately wouldn't survive if we let them do what they want to do. Therefore, we have to push back. And the Western media, at least one part of it I haven't looked at all, but one out of that interview, of course, again, like you said, they're hanging on his every word. Check out how the Telegraph reported on, so what I just said. Check out how the Telegraph today reported on that interview that I just summarized for you. Check out how the Telegraph reported on it.
Putin killed my country. No. Putin says Russian people, quote, may not survive.
They're losing. See how they spin it? No context, and they just...
Yeah, no. It's gas. That'll be one take on it. But then you'll get the serious take. So there'll be a commentary, like an op-ed further on in the paper or something, and it'll say, those Russians. Putin has again regurgitated the tropes about how we somehow in the West intend to break Russia up into different parts.
Of course we don't.
Typical. And he sells it to the Russian people, and well, unfortunately, too many of them eat it up. Like, there's no evidence for it. It's preposterous. And then you're like, but Putin's whole time in office, 20 some years off and on, is like, it's a testimony to it. Chechnya, Dagestan, Georgia, Ukraine, the color revolutions, Kazakhstan. When he intervened the first time, 2000, for what would have been the second Chechen war, there was big incipient rebellion taking place in Kazan, which is a Muslim majority, kind of basically they're descendants of the Tatar, the Mongolians. Much further north, though. I mean, it's like 300 kilometers, but due east of Moscow. The country was falling apart, and he said at the time, but much less often, I suppose. Now he has clout, so when he says the same message, their long-term goal has always been to break us up. The only difference is that now Russians and Westerners have more evidence with which to believe what he's always suspected. He doesn't sound like a loon anymore. He's able to basically, in recent years, come out as a full-on conspiracy theorist because the evidence, he's been there with us as the evidence has piled up and piled up, you know, and he now has a receptive audience to it, which is why they have to respond in ever crazier ways, like with the Telegraph headline we just saw, just simply by spinning it or dismissing it if they're taking it seriously. It's amazing. He was saying the same things in the early 2000s, though, but much more discreetly, and they didn't get wide traction. Imagine having to wait 20 years for people around you, first of all, never mind foreigners, just your own people, to get on board with what you see. 20 freaking years, and all the pain and suffering that could have been avoided before then.
Yeah, well, no, you got to let people learn on their own time, you know.
Yeah. Crimean Bridge is fully reopened this week.
Right.
Good job, Kiev. All you've done is nothing. Boris Johnson. Oh, I hope this happens. Boris Johnson wants to become the next Secretary General of NATO.
Awesome.
Please, for God's sake, please. It would be so much more interesting than that awful Stoltenberg. The stultifying, stammering, stuttering idiot.
Big goon, yeah.
Can't stand him. Can't stand him at all.
Did you
pusillanimous? I preferred Rasmussen.
Yeah.
He was more poetic. He at least, like, I remember some of his bullshit yarns were great. Long before it was fashionable, in like 2014, Putin had only just become Russian man bad because of Crimea. And he came up with a yarn that no one else ever repeated. It just came out of his mouth one day. He said his suspicion was that at the time there were protests in parts of England against fracking. Big environmental protests. You know, they did not want, because they'd seen some of the results happening in the United States with damaged water supply and minor microquakes and stuff. And there was a protest movement against fracking in England, which the Tory government at the time wanted to, you know, let off the leash. And Rasmussen came out of nowhere and said, yeah, my suspicion is that the Russian government is funding an influence operation to get protesters in England to pressure the government not to allow fracking, which, of course, increased the supply of gas from Russia to Europe. At the time, it was jaw-dropping because no one had ever talked like that, you know?
Yeah.
That's the norm now. That's the conspiracy theorizing 101 is coming out of every Western leader, but it was novel then.
Western political leaders fervently believe that there is no agency amongst the average man or woman in the street, that they have no political awareness, that there's no real agency, that anything they do, any protests that happen are all any protests that happen that are against what the politicians in the West want must be the work of the other foreign enemy, whoever it is, Russia, whoever fits the profile, right? The ordinary people in Western countries can never never come to correct conclusions themselves and not like certain things their government are doing and go out and protest about them. It has to be some kind of an operation by a foreign entity. That's because they themselves think that they control their people all the time. They're the ones who control their people.
It gives away how their minds work.
How they view them, yeah. Did you see... I haven't talked about COVID in a long time. Woody Harrelson.
What is that?
The COVID. Do you know who... The COVID went away, about a year ago on the 24th. Or COVID just suddenly went away. That guy who entered... there's a picture of a guy, the first of Russian military coming through the border at Crimea into Ukraine. And
the meme was that he's a hero for ending COVID.
He single-handedly defeated COVID by launching the Ukraine war. But Woody Harrelson was on SNL, you know, Saturday Night Live. Strange, because they had gone totally like lefty woke kind of thing in recent years. But it's weird that he got to do this. But maybe they didn't understand what he was saying at the time, or he didn't tell them. Have a listen.
Okay, so the movie goes like this. The biggest drug cartels in the world get together and buy up all the media and all the politicians and force all the people in the world to stay locked in their homes. And people can only come out if they take the cartel's drugs and keep taking them over and over. I threw the script away. I mean, who is going to believe that crazy idea?
Pretty smart, huh?
Good, yeah.
He said he's talking about getting a script, you know.
Yeah.
Here's the plot. Here's the plot of the movie, and I was like, no way, that
exactly. But there are things that happened those years that you wouldn't have put.
But
in a movie.
He's pretty, you know,
clued in. Yeah,
clued in on the whole COVID business. He has mentioned, you know, said pretty. You know,
he's pretty actually awake as opposed to woke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you notice in that thing there, he said the biggest drug cartels in the world get together and buy up all the media as part of his thing. This was a response to his SNL skit.
Yeah.
It's kind of proving his point, no?
It's literally what happened in 2020. British government bought all. They issued an order and said all media advertising slots must be made available to the government for the duration of this entire pandemic.
Right. And sponsored by Pfizer. So Woody Harrelson's in his you know, is pretend movie script there says, as part of, you know, the pushing the vaccines on people, the biggest drug cartels in the world get together and buy up all the media. So he says that as exposing what actually happened during the COVID thing, and then the media responds by doing exactly what.
Prove his point.
Yeah, it's getting worse. Like, I mean, I don't know.
The inanity is getting worse, but thankfully for now, Putin has saved us from Bill Gates and his needles. Although he wants to come back, he wants to now somehow put the spike protein in food supply. Can't trust him, that Bill
Gates.
He's already succeeded, you know, with some of his mosquitoes. Something going on there with mosquitoes they release in Florida and the Zika virus.
Yeah. Did you see that this was out? This is just from today, actually. Do you remember getting censored for something like this? Lab leak, most likely origin of COVID-19 pandemic. Energy Department now says.
Right, this is today's Wall Street Journal.
Mm-hmm. U.S. agencies' revised assessment is based on new intelligence. Repeatedly, I'm amazed at how smart I am, and not just me, but many other people out there who over the past number of years were dismissed as crazy conspiracy theorists and idiots and etc. But we repeatedly said years ago at this point, stuff now, that it has taken intel agencies, the full power and might of intel agencies, a few years to actually come to. Now, either we're super lucky where we just like randomly hit on the right answer all the time, the right assessment of what's going on, or we're like smarter than intelligence agencies.
Definitely the latter.
You think that's what it is? We should form our own intelligence agency, our own think tank.
Haven't we?
Maybe.
Wink, wink, not nudge. Remember the handshake.
Don't tell anybody.
No, but they don't get too carried away. This isn't back in Easter 2020. They were first saying this.
It was for most of. Oh no, but you weren't allowed.
Lab leak. No, but they
voiced it and then poo-pooed it. They
Yes.
made it go away. It was
And
like
then
no
it came
way.
back again.
It was a good year before you could even say it on social media, and even then it was suspect. But people, I and many others got Facebook jail time for saying what's in the Wall Street Journal today.
Right. True. Yeah.
And Wall Street Journal is based on intelligence. They found some intelligence. So, what else happened this week other than all of that nonsense we just talked about?
Well, it was the 1 year anniversary, of course, of the launch of the special military operation.
Super military.
They are so clever. They our dear leaders are so clever. They apparently Kiev shipped them damaged Russian tanks, and they were placed in European capitals like Berlin for people to supposedly big up their support for Ukraine. Here's Justin Trudeau holding a rally with his Ukrainian emigre descent Nazis supporters in Ottawa. Just look at the head on this guy. Sorry to make you all watch this, but the fact that this guy is still leader.
I know. Not him.
Sir, I think Ukrainians
can tell you a little bit about freedom and liberty, so why don't you settle down? This is a night for
getting
them,
heckled.
not for you.
Yeah. Slava Ukraini.
This is a night for Ukrainians, not for you.
Ooh.
If you want to stand and cheer with Ukraine, do that. You want to wave that Ukrainian flag, please do. But let people celebrate that Ukraine is still standing and Canada stands with it.
What?
He's someone else who was saved by the invasion of Ukraine. Because without it, I don't know. We don't know what would have happened with the Freedom Convoy if this hadn't intervened. Zelensky, of course, marked it too by warning the US warning Americans who don't support the war that if they don't keep sending tens of billions of dollars every day, the US will lose its influence in the world. You see?
Well, yeah. At least he's being honest about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're all in here for us because otherwise it's all over for you. Pax Americana goes with you if you pull out of this. So I think he was trying to probably convince renegade MAGA Congress people, but they're not for convincing. Trump responded directly to that, actually. He said, Ukraine, maybe he meant probably the Ukrainian issue, but he said that Ukraine has total dominance over the US right now, which again speaks to indeed the existential totalizing aspect of all this. They can't. Us, the quoting Macbeth, we've gone too far in to come out, you know?
Yeah.
We're wading too far in blood. This is horrific. This is footage I saw today. This is, remember what we've been reading about HIMARS?
Yeah.
And that there isn't a single HIMARS strike that is not 100%
coordinated with
by the US. It has to be.
US intelligence, US and
this
European.
Is a HIMARS strike today.
Yeah.
On an ambulance.
In Donetsk, right?
In Donetsk, killed 4 doctors. So remember and they were going in, there was a previous airstrike. So they were arriving on scene to help injured. This reminds me of
a
Iraq.
Previous HIMARS strike. No, it was a follow-up.
Yeah. Reminds me of the Iraq videos.
Yeah.
So they had to provide the coordinates, targeting coordinates, the codes to make the launch.
Yeah.
All that's come to the back end. That came from America. The United States basically today fired a rocket deliberately on an ambulance and killed 4 doctors. Back home. That wasn't in Kiev. That was from somewhere in Nebraska or whatever.
Well, no, they have intel probably in European countries.
Or maybe Ramstein, yeah.
Yeah.
Bakhmut cauldron is nearly complete. Bakhmut's going to fall any day now.
Yeah.
Which will end the second basic line of defense. There's one more behind that, isn't there? There's basically roughly there were 3 lines with deep bunkers and trenches. In the meantime, though, I don't know what's going on. The Kremlin warned last week that the Kiev forces are preparing to invade Transnistria.
Yeah.
They only just say that willy-nilly. There probably is a build-up of forces. Why there? Apparently they have huge stores of Soviet-era ammo there, which would be very useful to them.
Yeah. That the Russians...
Moldovans are nervous. There was a pretty sizable demonstration. About 70,000 people protesting in Moldova in support of Russia. Okay, we've done Biden and Putin side by side, which is kind of the story of last week. The real president versus the simulacrum of a president. Now let's do Trump side by side. Just as Biden was taking off and on Air Force One and falling down the stairs again, Trump was on his way somewhere. Where was Trump going? Trump was taking off on Trump Force One to
East
Palestine, Ohio. And we mentioned this last week. This happened the beginning of this month, February 3rd, but there's something about it. I know a lot of people were like jumping on it. No, this is like deliberate sabotage. I don't know why they went with that instinct first, because my first instinct was I've seen so many chemical incidents as plants and derailments, either or. that have just put it down to increasing fecklessness and the effect of living under pathocracy. When you end up with people like Sam Brinton, is officially the government representative in charge of how to deal with nuclear waste, it's more likely you're going to get a nuclear waste incident. You know, maybe not immediately as a result, but down the road. So in general, when Buttigieg is, you know, minister or head of Department of Transport or something, a train's going to maybe that bit more likely to go off the rails. He's just not capable. They're incompetent, you know. So incompetence, basically. But since then, well, it always bothered me that they decided to burn it off. That's your first instinct. They said, well, the fire had already started, and what we feared was a massive chain reaction and explosion in as yet unaffected train cars or tanks. But they set off this huge control burn.
Vinyl chloride was the chemical. I don't know. From what I know, it was all vinyl chloride in all of the cars. So I don't know about a chain reaction or whatever. I mean, they say it was a controlled burn, but of course, it wasn't a controlled burn. A controlled burn is where you actually control the burning of something, whereas they just set fire to it all and released this massive plume of toxic smoke that kind of blew eastwards over over the East Coast, basically. It's pretty toxic. So, I mean, it was just seen, I suppose, as the... it may well have been sabotage, you know, that the train derailment was caused by sabotage by someone, by who knows, I don't know. But how they dealt with it in the moment was seen as the best solution. It's either let it all just lie there and seep into the ground. Obviously, you can't pick it up, but you can't really clean it up. It's already dispersed. It's leaked from the train, the containers. So the next best thing is to, the least worst of those two options is to just float it up into the air, like in balloons, and let it blow away, or blow down on top of people. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Get it out of the ground, you know.
I can't. Yeah,
I don't know if that was
what was the better thing to do, but burn it off. Or what is a normal hazmat? Maybe it depends on every situation what you should or shouldn't do. Do you arrive with pump trucks and try and recapture the chemical?
No,
I think that the whole shtick was it was already burning, and it was the safest thing. We had to make a snap decision. Blah blah blah. You've probably seen the CCTV footage of the train traveling through a town before that, and the undercarriage of one of the tanker cars is on fire.
Right.
Or at least there's sparks. There's bright light. Presumably it's flames. You can't quite make it out in the footage. Here's something that's happened since then. So this is Newsweek, February 20th. We're today 26th, so just under a week ago. Unrelated, but I tell you what, no wonder people connected the two, at least in terms of the concept. There's shit going on in the US now that is a lot of it, it's accidental, but there's so many weird stories that kind of come in between the accident stories. Pipe bomb found near Philadelphia train tracks sparks conspiracy theories. How near is near? They don't say. It wasn't clear. Newsweek couldn't find out in time for their report about the reports, but still, pipe bomb. Okay, so but it suggests something funky going on at or near trains. Okay. Also, the same day, February 20th, in a town called Bedford, also in Ohio, it's about 70 miles, which is 110 some kilometers as the crow flies from East Palestine. So not connected, not on the same train track. It's a different place, but still, it's close in space and time. This happened. Bedford, Ohio. It's a metallurgical plant with a foundry and everything. It exploded. I don't just mean that, there was a transformer that blew and it caught fire and the fire spread. I mean, the description and Reuters I have here, the freaking thing exploded. It killed at least one person, injured about 2 dozen. Exploded, like molten stuff falling across the street. So that's about 70 miles away, 2 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, this is not related to East Palestine directly, but it's actually related to this one.
Yeah, the one in Ohio.
And a team of environmental accident investigators is sent from a private company
to clean up the situation, or
to go check this one out.
The one in Ohio, the metals factory in Ohio, yeah.
Yeah, and the plane crashes 2 minutes after takeoff from the Bill and Hillary Clinton Airport in Little Rock, Arkansas. Like, again, I know it's just Bill, and I know, but Little Rock, come on.
Breaking news tonight of a plane crash in Little Rock, Arkansas. We learned the people on board were actually headed here to Northeast Ohio to help clean up the Oakwood Village explosion from Monday. All 5 people on board worked for an environmental consulting firm.
The plane took off from the Clinton National Airport around noon and was headed for John Glenn Columbus International Airport. Right now, we are digging into this story. We'll have much more on air and online as soon as we learn it.
Don't take off from Bill and Clinton Airport.
Yeah, especially if you're going somewhere that's politically possibly contentious. But how do you know what's politically possibly contentious? You think you're going just to investigate an industrial accident. The next thing, she said that we'll have more on this later on our website. There have been 0 updates. There's not a freaking single. The plane dead. They're dead. All of them. Everyone on board dead. No one knows. No investigation. No update about it. It's just it's the lack of information in addition to the kind of spooky para connections between these events that just makes no wonder people start conspiracy theorizing and speculating up the wazoo. I mean, Christ, even the Washington Post is asking whether the burning off chemicals of the train in East Palestine, was it necessary? Was it the right move? I mean, it's not clear cut what should or shouldn't be done. Again, unrelated, different incident, but happened last week as well. 2 things. Another chemical derailment. Same company, Norfolk Southern, this time in West Virginia. Not a big spill there, but still. Also last week, a fire forcing the evacuation of the entire facility, at least briefly, at the uranium enrichment facility in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. That's a lot even for 1 month. That's not even the whole list of shit that's happened. I don't know. Is it just that shit happens and the shit happens more often under Biden?
It's hard to say, but you have to. I mean, certainly there's the opportunity for people in positions of power in the US with influence to blow things up and set things on fire if it serves their agenda. The problem is figuring out a motive. There's means, an opportunity. But motive, you have to come up with a motive. It's a motive that's always in debate. Like all conspiracy theories, most conspiracy theories, theories that are called conspiracy theories, there's always means and opportunity. If you put it in the position, if you put it at the doorstep of government, some kind of government agency,
it's easy to break things.
Right, when you have that kind of influence. But the motive is always the thing that is questioned in conspiracy theories or poo-pooed in conspiracy theories, i.e., why would anybody do that? There's nobody in government who wants to blow up a train laden with chemicals, to cause a chemical. Who wants to do that? Why would they do that? Sure, they could do it. Why would they do it? Why would they blow up a metals factory? Why would they set fire to a metals factory? Why would they set fire to chicken factories? Why would they kill a bunch of chickens? Like, millions of chickens, but yeah.
Other food processing plants.
Other food processing plants. Why would you blow those up?
Well,
you have to posit a certain scenario to make that fit. And the scenario obviously is the government. There's a certain element within the government that's out to
make life harder for people.
Make life hard for people. Yeah.
So they'd be less likely to rebel and or vote in a Trump-like figure again.
Yeah, keep them in a state of insecurity and
how much
fear.
Maybe you have to answer with a question: how much do they value securing the White House, the next election, and the one after, in perpetuity,
or securing generalized control?
Look back on the last 6 years. How much did they value having control of the White
Mueller
House?
report, making
Russiagate.
Yeah,
they valued it a lot to the point of harming the country.
They're willing to go to significant lengths.
People suffer.
Yeah, it just depends on whether or not these things then serve that agenda. So now you've established a motive. You really haven't really established a motive, but you've established the plausible reality, the plausible truth that there are elements within the government that, will go to significant lengths in underhanded and devious ways to secure what they think is their agenda or their plan. But in this case, you have to put these into that plan. You have to make them fit.
Yeah, and it's
or you have to expand their agenda out to. Like in the examples you gave with Trump, that was a political motivation to get their people, their particular political types in power and keep their ideological buddies in power, basically, the people that they wanted in power. And here I'm talking about the deep state or whatever you want to call it, getting politicians and presidents, whatever, in power. That's a reasonable enough theory, and it fits and it makes sense. But you'd have to go there, and I mean, there's no proof one way or the other. You'd have to simply allow for the idea that these particular types of people also have an agenda to make life as difficult and hard for the average citizen as possible. They have an agenda to grind the country down into a state of, suffering and difficulty that will, they think, maybe engender apathy, and therefore people are more controllable. So it's a pretty broad conspiracy theory that you're positing there, Neil, but it's possible,
I know.
It's possible.
To clarify, there's no way this is a win for the White House. So because of other extenuating circumstances, namely keeping the broader Western world, and ideally the whole world, on side against Putin, they have to shuffle him off to Kiev. Right. The day he leaves, Trump arrives in East Palestine with a ton of cargo. He hands out his aid,
water bottles.
He walks around. He shakes their hand. Of course, it's a Trump supporting. It's his base.
It's a red state.
They love it. He looks great. Biden looks like an asshole in contrast.
Divides the country politically.
On Friday, he was asked,
"More?
Are you going to go?" Biden. He's returned from Kiev. At this point, I'm not. He said, we were there 2 hours after the train went down. 2 hours. He means like emergency responders. Who's we in them? So he got very defensive about it. And initially, there was not a request for me to go out, even before I was heading over to Kiev. So I'm keeping very close tabs on it. We're doing all we can. They just look really bad. So I'm not in any way suggesting that it's a win for the White House.
No,
it's
definitely not a win for the country and the general atmosphere. Within America. I mean, the more I think there's got to be a sense at this point with terror attacks, with mass shootings, with infrastructure issues, train derailments, China flying deadly balloons over their country, make them look weak. There's got to be a general sense amongst Americans that and in the broad strokes, America isn't doing the best,
Yeah.
And it's encouraging that idea.
They're not.
Is the agenda,
as they want to say, they're not sending their best, so to speak. But I mentioned Sam Brinton earlier. I'm gonna end my thinking. This is funny. Let's end on a humorous note, because thinking about Ohio and the implications is just depressing as hell. So Sam Brinton, remember, this is, quote, the binary bearded LGBT queer activist / nuclear physicist, appointed Deputy Assistant Secretary of Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition in the Office of Nuclear Energy. That was his full title, I kid you not. And he lasted last year from June to December 2022 because he was caught twice stealing women's clothes from airport carousels. It turns out, actually, he's been doing it as far back as 2018 because what just happened was the clothes he was wearing on a number of occasions, like high-profile event, were recognized by an American fashion designer as being her clothes
that were stolen.
They were stolen
from an airport. Yeah.
So watch this segment.
So not only did he steal the clothes, but he started walking around in them.
He wore them publicly, and she only recently, noted. Well, yeah, because she wouldn't. There are high-profile events like speeches in DC, a press conference, maybe, but not. They only got flashed widely after he became notorious because of his kleptomaniac arrest twice in the recent. So this woman saw him on the news recently, and then she's like, I recognize. He's wearing my clothes. So I took her to the segment on it. And I've just told him to give you the whole story. So just before you play it, basically I want you to watch this to see how often side by side photo comparisons of what he's wearing versus her in the same outfit. And you realize it's definitely her gear.
Here is a breath of hilarity, really one of our favorite stories of all time. A Tanzanian fashion designer based in Houston called Asa Kashman says she lost her luggage at the baggage claim of DCA, Washington Reagan National, back in 2018. A couple of days ago, she was watching Fox News, and she saw the coverage of Sam Brinton. That would be Joe Biden's non-binary nuclear waste disposal expert who had this weird fetish involving stealing women's clothes from airport carousels. And then it hit Compson. Sam Brinton was photographed wearing her clothes, and they're very distinctive clothes. You're seeing the side-by-side on your screen right now. Now, we're in touch with her. She's in Tanzania right now, but when she gets back, she promises to come on this show and discuss what it's like to have your fashion creations stolen by Joe Biden's nuclear waste, non-binary airport fetishist. But in the meantime, we're joined by Chadwick Moore of The Spectator to assess this ongoing story, which really is, Chadwick, you got to admit, the greatest story ever. Now, I just have to ask, you've been following this since the beginning. You first saw this guy, Sam Brinton. Was your first thought, I bet this guy never steals women's underwear off airport carousels?
Well, yeah, you have to pardon my glee, because I don't think anyone thought this story could possibly get any better. And now, two words that have to apply to him that I would mean sincerely in this case would be stunning and really, really brave. It's not like he's parading around in a Gap hoodie. I mean, these are very distinctive, quite lovely clothing that he was wearing, and that poor designer having her creations defiled by the radioactive klepto queen in the energy department.
That's her in the originally. That's him in it.
But I'm a little disappointed in myself and in fellow journalists that none of us took a closer look at his clothing and asked what exactly he was wearing, because we should have been tipped off the minute we saw some of these outfits that looked like he raided a village in Africa or something. Maybe we would have started getting more answers then.
That was not off the rack, and that should have been the first tip-off that he had a Tanzanian designer he was stealing from. And I agree with you. We fell down on the job. Chadwick Moore, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Oh, my God.
Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our...
Yeah. Joe Biden's
freak show.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know.
You can't comment on that.
It's just like, that's as serious as all the other stuff is. It's just, it still provokes the same reaction in me, which is just like a kind of blank stare and like, what? I mean, really? Is this really happening? I mean, we meant to take this seriously. That's my response to everything. Everything I see in the Western media, it's like, I just go, really? I mean, is this? Let me check again. No, is that a what do you call it, satire site? Nope, it's the Western media. Okay, I suppose I have to say something about it because apparently it's what's happened. It's what's real, right? According to the Western media, this is what's real, and we're meant to just like read it, absorb it, and say that's normal, or okay, carry on. But I can't, because none of it's normal. None of it, it's all hysterical, ridiculous, made up nonsense to one extent or another.
This story, you mean?
But everything.
His being hired.
But everything across the board, like everything that we've talked about on the show and we talk about every week in the show provokes the same response in me as that segment provokes me, which is just a kind of slightly bemused, slightly disturbed stare, which implies, carries with it the question of, is this real? Am I meant to actually comment on this? Is this not some kind of comedy show? That for me, that's across the board. Like when I read the Western media on the reports on Ukraine and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, are they really saying that? Is that real? Like when Putin, like I said, like an example from today, when we talked about Putin gives a speech about why they're defending themselves in Ukraine and saying, if we don't defend ourselves in Ukraine, the Russian people might cease to exist. Then I go and look at the media and I see they're reporting on it that says, Putin says the Russian people might cease to exist. And that's all they're saying. And they're taking it as if that's what he said. And I'm like, but that's not what he said. Are you really reporting it as if that's what he said? Are you really telling such an egregious lie? I mean, and then passing it off as the truth? That just provokes me this kind of like, I have to go. See ya. I don't even have a comment anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've seen it so often that I almost don't have a comment. And I mean, we talk about it here, but internally, that's what it provokes me. It's just like disbelief, slight bewilderment, and then resignation to, yes, this is more horseshit that you have to wade through. So yeah, anyway, I think we've waded through enough horseshit for today, and we've subjected our poor listeners and watchers and viewers, to enough as well. I'm sure they've had enough. So yeah, I think we'll call it quits for today. I think that's enough. That's all the bullshit anybody could be expected to handle on a Sunday afternoon or whatever day you're watching this. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Don't forget to do whatever to the like button and smash all the other buttons. And we'll be back next week with another show. So until then, have a good week. See you later.
Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Can't stop the signal now.